Malayalam cinema keeps coming out with thrillers all year, every year, and somehow they manage to make each one unique and different. How well the latest one fares? Let's talk about it. Hello guys, I'm Nona Prince and today talking about the latest Malayalam film Rekhachithram, directed by Jofin T. Chacko, my first Malayalam film of 2025, and it's another Asif starring thriller. Couldn't catch Tovino's identity, but I can easily say a solid start to the year. This film is uniquely positioned. I don't know how well it will work with people who don't follow Malayalam cinema because there is some context you need to have for the film to work better. Knowing some of the actors the film is talking about, the industry, as well as the feeling they are trying to create. Now I'm surprised that I've reached a point in my journey of Malayalam cinema that I knew the context. And a big thanks to Rajan and many viewers of the channel who keep me in loop. But why do I say that you need to know context? Because this film is actually an alternate history, which means they have taken a real event and built up a fictional story around it. Now the real event is from 1985 when Mammootty was shooting for his film Rekhachithram and was shooting for a particular song from that film which is very famous. The film builds a murder mystery around this event which has to be solved in the present 40 years later. Now this is a very cool idea for a thriller and it never really becomes a gimmick. The investigation really has an organic flow to it. You as audience question how are they gonna even solve it 40 years later, and that keeps you engaged throughout the film. Now I do feel that the writing of the film offered way more than what was executed on the screen, which means that there were very interesting elements throughout the story which were not that well implemented in the narrative. The tone of the film is very unclear because it's not a very raw police investigation or a very intense thriller. It is very much grounded but has a lot of slow-mo movements, and the purpose for that slow-mo is to create tension but also to give some heroic moments to the hero, which is very much a commercial tool, and it's even used like that in the film. Now the flashback scenes have a very different tone altogether, as if it's a different film, be it the look of it or the background music, and you can understand that they want to create a distinction between two timelines, but there is a coherency missing. The editing and the pacing was good. The title appears 40 minutes into the film, and I actually thought it's saying interval until the subtitle appeared which said the name of the film, and when the actual interval happens we don't get anything. It just gets cut abruptly. What also makes this narrative stand out is that it's not about finding who is the murderer. We get to know that quite early. It's more about what actually happened that time and who was the victim. That identity matters the most. Now there was an interesting dynamic between a hero, police officer played by Asif, and the villain, the supposed murderer. It was a cat and mouse game happening between both of them, but they never had a dialogue exchange. It was always a stare or a look at each other passing by, which I felt very interesting. And I think what works in the favor of the film is that they managed to make us care about the victim, which was very, very important. That we feel the injustice she went through, and by the end with that last scene you get emotional. But again in this moment that context comes in, which makes the connection really happen. I have to say there's a big VFX moment in the film which really worked well for me. But it really made me wonder, do you really need to de-age the actor? He looks quite young to me. Now a lot of places in the film the staging didn't work for me. There were a lot of uneven performances, especially from the side characters. There were some portions during the investigation which were very boring because you would see the inspector doing the investigation, going places to places, and then there would be a whole scene of him briefing his seniors about the same thing which we saw. That's why I wish the investigation was more visually interesting, especially with the concept they had, solving the case after 40 years. And there was a lot left unexplored which I wish they had explored. Like initially for Asif Ali's character they set up something, but that doesn't really get a payoff. There's no character arc from that. He is just a police officer who's solving this case, that's it. And overall I felt there could have been more layers to the narrative. And I'm saying this because there were a lot of opportunities to do so, which would have made the film more impactful. There were few theories that came to my mind while watching the film. Maybe there could have been a relationship dynamic between a hero and the victim, a connection developed between the time span of 40 years. Maybe he gets haunted by her, he's obsessed to solve the case, and that in a way connects to the setup he had initially about getting suspended, that he really wants to prove something with this case, again which was mentioned initially by some other character about him, but it's more of a lip service. We don't see it. Or maybe the case is solved by a hero but there's no way to prove it. There's not enough evidence, you cannot prove who's guilty, but by the end it's a justice of karma that comes into play, because that's how even we start the film. And again this is something the film shows but it's not committed to as a whole. I actually like the reveal when we find out who the main culprit is and how that comes to an end. There's this factor of love even between the culprit, which again I felt was a cool idea, but we didn't explore it enough. Or maybe we could have a supernatural angle. Okay, stop right there, I'm going off the rails here. But that's the kind of film this is, that it makes you think of your own narrative, and I guess that's a sign of a good film, or at least good writing, that there are so many possibilities. Now I tried my best to avoid spoilers as much as I could. Film is still out in theaters to be watched, and if you want to discuss the film further you can always leave your thought in the comments, or we could do a live session. But the question is, will this film end as one of the best films 2025 from Malayalam cinema? We'll find that out. But what about 2024? You can check it out here. The best films from last year and the thrillers that made the list. Do let me know your thoughts, and I will see you next time.